Welcome to Diligent Canine, and in this Q&A video I'm going to talk about, is my dog smart enough to train X? Now, when this question was initially presented to me on my personal page, somebody was asking if their dog was smart enough to learn how to stop barking. And I gave a pretty straightforward but polite answer. But the summary of that is that if your dog is smart enough to manipulate you by barking to get what it wants, it is most definitely smart enough to learn how to stop barking to get what it wants, either because you're withholding something that barking is not achieving and that being quiet will, or that barking or making noise when not told to do so incurs some sort of punishment or negative consequence. So this applies to a more broader perspective as well when it comes to things like dog sports or other activities that you may want to do with your dog. And the thing you have to consider, one, are the dog's genetics. What has that breed and that animal been bred for? What has its job been throughout history? And you don't have to, you can get as scientific or as specific as you want, but just do some general research and think about the types of things that are literally in a dog's genes for them to do. It's going to be really hard to work against that, but of course, like I've said in other videos, breed generalizations are just that. They're generalizations. Any one specific dog may have a dramatically different temperament than what is stereotypical for their breed. So after considering the genetics of a dog, the next thing you want to think about is, what do you have time to train for? It may not be a question of the dog's physical capabilities. It may not be a question of their genetic potential or cognitive intelligence, although those are all things to consider. What do you have time to train for? Things like obedience training, barring competitive obedience, only takes a few minutes a day, and it really is that simple. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. I've mentioned this in other obedience videos as well, that really the smaller sections that you can break that obedience down into, we call that component training, really simplifies the process of your dog learning. So your regular household obedience, you could constantly try to perfect that, or just do it in little 2 to 5 minute chunks throughout your day, and then maybe you work on a little public obedience on the weekends, and that might be all you have time for, or that might be what you choose to have time for. Other things are going to take a lot more work and preparation. So if you're thinking about Schutzhund, obviously you can do some foundation work at home, but eventually you're going to need a decoy, you're going to need a trainer, you're going to need to find a club, and that's going to involve travel. You're going to have to travel to the club location, you're going to have to help set up, you're going to have to actually train your dog. Unless you're a jerk, you're going to help train other people's dogs, and then you're going to have to pack everything up, and then you're going to have to drive back. This might also be true if you're doing competitive obedience or competitive agility. You're going to have to travel somewhere, you're going to have to sort of get set up and get situated, and then you actually train your dog, and then you do it all in reverse. This may be something that you only have time for on the weekends, or it may be something that you have time for periodically throughout the week, several times a week. So the question, getting back to the question of, is my dog smart enough to train X, Y, or Z? The question is probably. Many trainers can get a single dog, hopefully using a variety of methods if necessary, to do a lot of general tricks, or reinforce and build certain behaviors. So it is not too difficult for a dog to learn a lot of general things. However, there are some specific things that will be more or may be more difficult for a particular dog or a particular breed of dog. Now, I realize that that is a sweeping generalization, but it is valid, I feel. And that's because different breeds exist for different reasons. What is great about the sporting world for dogs is that you can find clips all over YouTube of breeds or specific dogs sort of defying those stereotypes. You can see very large, cumbersome dogs doing very well in agility. However, use some common sense in your judgment. Something like a bulldog is not going to be very good in an agility sport. Their bodies aren't conducive to that. So it's not just the intelligence of the dog. Dogs can learn a lot of commands. They're constantly watching you and learning from you. And this is something that's difficult for people to understand sometimes, is that the dog is always learning from you no matter what you're calling your time. So even if your official training sessions are only 30 minutes of the day, the dog is still learning from you 24 hours a day. They're always paying attention to your behaviors and seeing what will get them reinforced, what will get them fed, petted, things like that. So to summarize, chances are your dog is smart enough to train whatever it is that you are wanting to train with your dog. At the extreme ends of that, there are some limitations, and that simply exists because different sports cater to different breeds or different attributes that dogs were then bred to fulfill, and the same with other sports or other functions. So be that biting or smelling, tracking, agility, all of those things, there are dogs that are bred specifically for those purposes. So if it breaks down to purely intelligence, the answer is yes, your dog is smart enough to learn. However, there may be limitation as to how your dog performs during those different activities. So I hope that clarifies the subject a little bit. And as always, thank you for watching. And remember to subscribe on patreon.com/diligentcanine to support military and working dogs.